Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, February the 4th, 2025, and today we're talking about compostable bags for produce, slowing down to speed up, and do weeds tell us really anything about our soil conditions? So let's do it. All right, I hope everyone is having a decent start to their week. The weather here has been outrageous. It was in the 60s yesterday, and that would be t-shirt weather in Celsius. And one of the things I had to do was restart my pepper trays, which was cool. Here's the story. On Sunday, it was also beautiful out, borderline t-shirt weather, and I was getting some random projects squared away. One such project was just picking up some random stuff that was along our fence row, which, I'm thinking, I got this. No snakes, yellow jackets, nests to worry about, fairly straightforward. What could go wrong? And I start to pull up this rack I had sitting there. It's just kind of like a drying rack that I have, but it's, it was kind of caught in the grass. And so naturally, I just started to yank harder. And as I do so, I hear a snap below from the grass, and I assume it's just the wooden rack, this wooden drying rack that I'm picking up. I'm assuming that it snapped. Nope, the chicken wire had gotten caught on a spigot from my irrigation line, and when I was yanking it, I busted the PVC pipe. Now, that's not a hard fix, but I didn't have the part, didn't really want to run to the store, and I'm thinking, no big deal, I can just use a hose and do the irrigating that I wanted to do. I can always fix that pipe later. NBD, right? So I finish cleaning up the fence and go to get my hose for irrigating, which is in the greenhouse. So I throw the whole thing over my shoulders and I can feel it get snagged on something. And for the second time, instead of investigating what the hose is snagged on, I decide to just give it a yank to see if I can free it, which totally works, except I hear a crash behind me. When I look back, I see the table where I had the peppers kind of just resting there and a tray of pawpaw seeds I'd started this weekend laying on the ground in a giant heap of seeds and potting soil all mixed together. So I scooped it all up into a tray and cussed a little bit, to be honest, and some of that will germinate, but there is no way of knowing what is what. I mean, obviously I'll be able to tell the pawpaws apart, but it's impossible to know which peppers are going to be which is fine, but I don't want to plant like 20 hot pepper plants accidentally and not enough sweet pepper plants. It's a very frustrating accident, to be honest, because we were getting close to germination on those, but it's also a frustrating loss because twice in a row I yanked instead of looked to see what the problem was. By the middle of the season, I typically get in a good habit of patience and thoughtfulness and not just jumping straight to the good old yank, but rather making sure I understand what the problem is first. But the early season is always the worst for mistakes like this for me because I'm out of practice, out of habit. Now, accidents are going to happen all season, but especially in the middle of the season, it becomes essential to minimize them. Is a break in the irrigation line primarily used for our wash pack, honestly, but is a break a big deal in early February? Not really. Annoying, sure, but if it's July, then I have to stop whatever I'm doing and go get that part and then fix it immediately. A dropped table of plant starts in February is a slightly bigger deal because it sets you back a full week or more on production, but still not as big of a deal as in July when I would have 10 or 20 trays sitting on that table, not just one or two. Anyway, it was a nice reminder to slow down and take my time, get in the habit of favoring doing things over getting things done. You'll hear that term, slowing down to speed up, a lot in the farming world, and it's good advice to just have in your head all the time, like even in February. Certainly, you still have to move fast, quickly, and develop a good economy of motion, but slowing down becomes essential for eliminating or reducing mistakes that cost a lot of time and effort, and sometimes fill the swear jar. Unfortunately for me, I was out of the habit. Moreover, it's not something that can be in your head all the time, all day long. It's not something that my even mentioning it or thinking about it will necessarily help you or me. It's something you have to learn and ingrain and make a habit out of. Regrettably, it is often a series of mistakes that reminds me to slow down. Anyway, cheers to early mistakes, hopefully reminding me to slow down so I can prevent mid-season mistakes later. I feel like if I had done a big fall and winter garden this year, perhaps I would have stayed in the habit, or you would think that this show would keep me in the habit given how incredibly detail intensive it is to produce it, but you'd be wrong. Another side of this is, of course, not having a table that could be knocked over with a hose holding valuable trays on it. But again, that was a quick fix that quickly fell apart. Maybe by year 20, that lesson will be ingrained enough that I won't make those mistakes anymore. But then what would I have to talk about? Anyway, thoughts on slowing down to speed up? Let us know. We'll take a quick break before talking about biodegradable/compostable packing. Just like that. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by RX Soil. Curious if your soil will be ready for planting this spring? RX Soil can help you find out with their at-home soil test kits. They'll ship it right to your door. Just send it back, prepaid shipping, and you'll have your lab results in just 2 business days. Their reports are simple, with tailored seasonal recommendations for fertilizers and amendments. Order now at rxsoil.com and use code DAILY, DAILY, for 10% off. Begin your soil prep now for a great spring with RX Soil. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Casista DVM, who writes, quote, "How realistic are biodegradable produce packages, or even replacing the bottom portion of a produce package with something like mycelial containers with a clear plastic topper? Do they not look appealing enough to sell? Are there packaging producers that could work with ecology-forward farming industry to make something that would sell? That sounds like something an industry rep would organize, but are there industry reps for other than Farmer Jesse for the pro-soil farming industry? I'm personally coming off the high of having negotiated with the local compounding pharmacies to lower costs on certain life-saving medications. So I know from experience that actual humans can discuss their needs with fabricators for mutual benefit." End quote. First of all, good on you for doing that work to help lower life-saving drug costs. It's sad enough that we can put a price on life, let alone that we do. This is especially true because sometimes people just can't afford it. Can't afford their life. So that's cool. All right, so as for packaging, great question, and it's complicated. First, a quick breakdown. Biodegradable packaging and compostable packaging are both options and both different things, more or less. Biodegradable, quote unquote, has a longer timeline and does not generally mean that the material can be composted, but it does mean it will break down eventually, at least into its constituent parts/ingredients, which is better, but it does depend on, what those parts are. And by parts, I mean chemicals or whatever additives. That's a broad generalization, as there are several different types of biodegradable bags, but that's kind of the idea. Certified compostable means that the package can be decomposed fully under commercial composting conditions, so long as the temperature and moisture are right. Ideally, in terms of packaging, certified compostable packaging is what we would all use and what we would need more of. There are a few producers of bulk certified compostable packaging. For most produce, kind of to your question, the package has to be clear to sell it, and it can't be too breathable for some stuff like lettuce or wilt in the fridge. This rules out many options, like any cloth options. Though to your idea about a brown container with a clear lid, maybe there is an option for some sort of hybrid, but there are clear options that exist. There are certified compostable clear clamshells that you can get through various companies like the king of all shipping fees, Webstaurant. There are also certified compostable cellophane bags out there, which cellophane is the primary option for clear produce packaging. Not all cellophane is created equal. However, as cellophane made from things like hemp, wood, pulp, etc., generally contains some additives that may not decompose the same, so it does have to be certified compostable ideally. There is, of course, the not small issue of cost. These compostable packages can be 20 to 40 cents a bag and a little more for clamshells. And I'm talking in bulk here. And when you're selling thousands of bags every month, that's no tiny expense. Compared to regular plastic bags that cost somewhere around 2 to 4 cents a piece, when you're using a couple hundred bags per week or more, 40 cents a piece is a considerable cost. Depending on your scale, you could be spending as much on your bags as your fertility. Certainly, this cost can be passed on to the consumer, but the customer has to be good with that as well. Environmentally, it's important, absolutely, but like all things in the world, this problem falls to the farmer, who has to determine, do I wrap up my operating capital in bags and charge more to the consumer, potentially risking losing customers, or use something else? Now, you could get creative. You could instead have customers bring their own bags, and we tried that for a while, but it was a little bit logistically difficult for us to do it at the farmers market. Then COVID hit, making it more difficult, if not outright impossible. So again, it's complicated, but there are options. That said, package technology is still changing and developing. The technology is getting better. The interest is in more environmentally appropriate packaging options is generally still growing. However, a really critical side of this debate around biodegradable/compostable packaging is where the packaging ends up anyway. So to go through all the expense and effort for sourcing your packaging to still create methane in a landfill feels a little bit sad, but it is also almost inevitable. Emphatically, compostable packaging or not, most food and most packaging still ends up in the trash. Indeed, even when they're sent to composting facilities. Not all of them, but this is because composters have to remove contamination, and some quote-unquote compostables are not permitted in organic composting operations. But also, honestly, it's really hard for composters to tell the difference between a compostable and a regular plastic bag after it's been sitting in a bunch of decomposing organic matter for a while, especially. So many of them just remove any bags that they see, anything shiny, and send it off to the landfill. Moreover, removal of contamination can be a fifth or more of the cost of running a certified organic composting operation. So if you're following, if someone does not care about this issue from an ecological standpoint, you should care about it from a cost standpoint. Plastic contamination is going to keep compost prices higher if composters continue to have to remove the contamination. To be sure, a package that will decompose in a landfill versus one that will not decompose at all is still important, but it's going to be hard for these compostable materials to have a positive environmental effect until all food packaging is switched over to compostable food packaging and composting becomes mandatory, so that composters just know that every piece of plastic coming into the system is compostable. Yeah, that's it. That's all it takes. No big deal. In my research for this, though, which I honestly do about once every year to evaluate the new options, I was heartened by how many people are sort of reporting on the waste industry, like wastedive.com. They seem to do a good job, but also lots of companies and organizations and composters are working on this issue of food waste and packaging and compostables. So I don't have a specific answer for the industry rep part of your question, but there seems to be quite a few options informationally and also just on the production side. I mean, I love this question. Thank you for it. I'm actually feeling more inspired than I have in years to explore some of these different and new options and report back. In fact, not just thanks for the question, but your Patreon support and things like super thanks on the YouTube videos is what enables me to not only research these things, but also play around with them on the farm. This feels like a subject I cannot do full justice to in a single segment for the simple fact that there are so many products and the technology is advancing rapidly, so expect more over time. But let me know any thoughts or experiences you all have with compostable or biodegradable packaging. What brands do you support or use? Hit us up in the comments. When we return, so too will the weeds. Be right back.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. I don't know about you, but I got into farming to be in the field growing food for my community, not creating elaborate pack lists, not writing newsletters or responding to emails, not designing and maintaining web stores, and etc. And I especially don't enjoy doing those things after an already full and fulfilling day of growing food. Actually, if I spent less time on my phone and behind the computer, that would be great. If only there were a solution for that. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand is the only all-in-one virtual assistant built by and for farmers. With one single platform, Farmhand enables you to offload your administrative tasks, send and manage communications, and sell more to your customers. Farmhand saves growers an average of 6 hours of administrative load each week. That's 6 hours so you can get back into the field, spend more time with friends or family, or have a life outside of the farm, which is actually a thing. Think about it. What would you do with an extra 6 hours a week? Sign up for a free trial with the link in the show notes, because now is the best time to dial in those systems for the next growing season. Follow the Farmhand link in the show notes to learn more. All right, back to the show.
Okay, so last week I discussed weeds and using them in the garden, and a couple people mentioned that weeds are good signifiers of certain soil issues. And on the one hand, that's kind of true. And on the other hand, it's kind of not. To be honest with you, using weeds for nutrient deficiency identification or evaluating pH and all that stuff is not super well supported, or at least it's not very helpful. Certainly there are weeds that have narrow nutritional needs, but by and large, the role, if you will allow me a small anthropomorphization there, of weeds is to cover disturbed soil as quickly as possible. In reality, most weeds are just advantageous recovery species looking to get in wherever they fit in. Disturbed soil is often slightly more bacterial leaning in nature because, as we have also discussed, tillage promotes oxygen-loving bacteria over fungi. Disturbed soils are often also more depleted because those organisms consuming the organic matter or leaching of nutrients, or all the above. So for that reason, there is some evidence that weeds do not thrive in healthier, more microbially balanced soils. But in that case, weeds are only telling us if our soil is disturbed and maybe not as healthy as we'd like it to be. They're not telling us what the chemistry looks like. Generally speaking, just because a certain weed prefers a certain pH or nutrient makeup does not mean it doesn't grow in other situations. It just may be that that particular weed doesn't thrive as much, similar to vegetable crops, in one condition or another. It will still germinate, it will still likely grow, it just may not grow as fast as the other weeds or crops who like those conditions. In conventional agriculture, this concept is slightly different because one, well, we're talking about a lot of land under one or two crops, and two, weeds will respond differently to certain synthetic fertilizers such as nitrogen and phosphorus, or the lack thereof, than they will to simple organic practices. Using a weed to indicate a certain soil condition in organic systems is just not super reliable because they will grow in many conditions. They may just really grow well in specific conditions or next to specific crops. Like I've heard anecdotally that weeds like sourdock grow in compacted soil, and sure, that's fine. They do. I've seen them. But anecdotally, I've observed sourdock growing in some of my loosest beds as well as some of my most compacted areas. There is a commonly cited article from the University of Michigan Extension that lists a bunch of weeds and what they indicate, but not a single citation. And I cannot find anything to back up the idea for any of them, except that some of those plants do prefer certain conditions, which again is not helpful because that doesn't mean they won't grow in other conditions, just maybe not as vigorously. So cool, that describes almost every plant. And if weeds are getting to the point that you can tell which ones are thriving and which ones are not, well, the giant weeds there will be a bigger problem than any nutrient deficiency they illuminate. For weeds, there just has to be a seed there, moisture, and the right temperatures plus time in disturbed soil. The chemical makeup of the soil, the available nutrients, may matter a little bit to the overall community of weeds, but not really. Not to any helpful extent, at least. This may also be true because I came across some research that indicated basically the way we farm now favors generalized weeds, which means that many weed species are no longer really prevalent enough, weeds that may have been more indicative at one time of specific soil conditions. Anyway, I feel like that idea that weeds indicate something specific about soils may be true sometimes, and can be true of certain biological communities within the soil, but it's one of those weird garden topics that isn't totally wrong, but isn't totally right either, or necessarily helpful. In my experience, weeds germinate when the temperatures are right, and so the soil is exposed. So exposed soil and the presence of weed seeds. That's largely what weeds indicate. Anyway, I don't want to pretend I've looked at every piece of research on this particular subject, but I did spend a fun, nerdy morning on it. So let me know your thoughts, as always. Otherwise, that's a wrap for Tuesday. But before we go, I want to give one last shout out to the good folks over at Rimmel Greenhouses for making this show possible. And these live reads are super fun. So, we'll see how good I can get at it by the end of the month. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value for your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Huge shouts to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music you can hear here. Hit the here thing again. You can use the QR code on the screen or click the link in the show notes to apply to be a producer/editor of this show. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook by me or the Seed Farmer by Dan Brisebois at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of February, we're in February now, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, let's see what we got. palm trees, and Alexandre Legault. I think I got that one right. I think you have to say it like that, even if it's probably just Alexander Legault. Yeah. This is actually the story of a couple ecologists who wanted to start an app, like a startup, and for ecologists and farmers to kind of get together, start working together. And it took off like gangbusters, but then they realized that the inadvertent effect was that they'd kind of just created like the most nerdy online dating app ever. But good on them. Yeah, that's a good combo. That's smart. Anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, Wednesday? That's a day we do. Yeah, we'll see you then. All right, bye.